Drive around, I need to clear my head. I love you. And I thought back into earlier that day when I had spoken to him last, that he had called me at work, and we're not supposed to take calls at this little summer or winter break job I was working. Dad could have cared less. We talked about 6 or 7 times a day. Called up, and I remember a normal conversation as we said goodbye. I said, "All right, Dad, love you." And I was taking the phone down. He said, "Moreland." "Yes?" He said, "I love you so much." I said, "I love you too, Dad." Click. That night, my sister and I fell asleep in one another's arms on his side of the bed, just praying that when we woke up, normalcy would pull back up in the driveway, that his truck would be out there, that things would be okay. Mom stayed up making calls, trying to contact friends, family, I'm sure co-workers, anyone who knew where he might be. The next thing I knew, it was early morning hours, and I heard my mom just screaming, sprinting up the stairs from the office, the sheet of paper just crackling in her hand. Get in the car, grab your shoes, grab your things, grab a jacket, get in the car." So we get in the car, and we're speeding all around town, searching for any place my dad may be, all the places he frequented and went, and we end up in front of his office, his little office that used to be right off the square. And at this point, police cars are all around. In the night, my mom had finally thought to call the suicide hotline, ask questions. They had prompted the police. She'd then gone downstairs and found an email sent in the early morning hours, a suicide letter from my dad. And I took that paper in the car and looked down and read how a broken, hurting, scared man, it summarized his life in 4 little paragraphs. And at that point, it became the rush to find my father before my father gave up. And I remember the noise and the chaos and the commotion and phones ringing and people yelling and paper shuffling all around his office. And I'll never forget the moment that everything just stopped. And 3 officers walked through the door, and they said, "Ma'am." I was sitting at my dad's desk, my sister next to me, my mom next to her, shuffling for any clues. He said, "Ma'am, we found your husband." I think, oh, thank you, Jesus. Whatever it is, whatever compelled it, whatever caused it, thank you. We'll fix it. We'll work through this. They said, "Let us clarify. We found your husband's remains." So it was January 3rd, 2009 that my dad put a gun to his heart and pulled the trigger. And it was January 3rd, 2009 that I watched my sister break, that I watched my mom lose her best friend and become a widow. No child should ever have to stand above a morgue table and see their father's body with a bullet hole in his heart because life was just that hard. And in the wake of all that happened, I had to go back to LSU. I knew that's what my father would have wanted me to continue my education, continue my athletic career. And my mom, who could probably give a much better testament of what it was like walking through the shockwaves of that type of disaster, in the front lines, she could probably come up here and give you a much more compelling speech on why this is crucial that we start this conversation. But I moved through seasons of wishing I had been clued in enough to truly care. Granted, he was my father. I went through seasons of wishing his pride hadn't owned his fate, he was too prideful to ask for help and reach out. I went through seasons of wishing that at times we remembered we're brothers and sisters before we're colleagues or co-workers or defenders versus prosecutors or competitors. That we're brothers and sisters navigating this world together, and that this world is hard. I went through seasons wishing that he had felt like he had community to be vulnerable with. It wasn't showing all of his weaknesses to his wife and his 2 children, but that he had colleagues to come up beside and do life with. When did we lose community for the sake of credibility and respect and status? When did we lose brotherhood and sisterhood for the sake of convenience. You guys, we've got to start the conversation because we've got to care. Lawyers Helping Lawyers is working to start that conversation. It's actively working to build community around struggling individuals. It's actively working to bring community around suffering families. It's actively working to support the business in the aftermath of the devastation. But it's only effective if community is involved in it, if we rally beside it. And we're the eyes that our colleagues look into when they need someone to listen and understand. And that we're the phone call that extends when we're thinking of someone, praying for someone, because we know they've been struggling. I want to challenge this group to understand that it's due time for the suicide of our comfort for the sake of saving lives. It's time we get uncomfortable and start the conversation. It's time we remember that we're brothers and sisters battling this world, that we link up and start fighting. Thank you.